Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar on European Research Council grants for top researchers from anywhere in the world. The webinar is brought to you by EURAXESS Australia New Zealand and the European Research Council. And of course, as I always say, it's great to see interest from researchers, not only in Australia and New Zealand, but very interestingly from 61 different countries across the globe. So thank you very much for joining from different parts of the globe. First of all, please allow me to introduce to you our esteemed guest speakers for today. We have with us, joining from Brussels, Dr. Endika, who is the panel coordinator for P6, Computer Science and Informatics at the European Research Council Executive Agency. Many thanks for joining us so early from Europe, Endika. We have also with us Professor Dr. Damien Farine, who is an associate professor for the Research School of Biology at the Australian National University. Welcome, Damien. I understand that you're joining from Japan, not very far, but still welcome to the session. And I'm Nishan Sandilia. I'm the EURAXESS Worldwide Country Representative for Australia and New Zealand. For those who don't know EURAXESS, it's an initiative of the European Commission that addresses barriers to the mobility of researchers and enhances scientific collaboration between Europe and the rest of the world. If you are interested in European research or career opportunities, international collaboration, or networking possibilities, I'd encourage you to please keep an eye on EURAXESS Australia New Zealand. And I understand that you're watching this either on your laptop or your phone. Please consider following us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube, because we try to post relevant news and events from the European research landscape. Now, before we begin, a few housekeeping things that I want all of you to please keep in mind. Please use the Q&A function, not the chat function in the interface, to ask any questions that you might have while our speakers are presenting, and we'll come back to take your questions after their presentation. Second thing is that you will receive the recording and slides of the session. However, the recording will not include the Q&A, and hence I'll recommend you to stay for the entire duration of the webinar so that you can hear the responses to the common queries that applicants have. Now, of course, I think I've spoken a lot, and I think it is now time that we hear from the experts. So let's begin and let's try to understand what sort of ERC opportunities that exist. And now I'll pass the presenter privilege to you, Endika. The floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Nishan, for this kind presentation. Let me share the slides. Thank you very much for the invitation and for giving me the opportunity to present the ERC to all of you. My name is Endika Bengoetxea, and as Nishan said, I work in the ERC, in the executive agency. I am the panel coordinator of the P6 panel, which is one of the biggest panels, actually, of the ERC. And I'm going to present you the different calls that we have. I work specifically mainly in starting consolidator and advanced, but obviously we are the teams that are together with the expert in the evaluation of the proposals for the calls, and also we do the follow-up of the ongoing grants. So we have a lot of interactions as well with the other panels and also with the colleagues in Synergy. So I move on. About the ERC, well, the particularity of the ERC is that it's a program set by a council that is representing the scientific community. Okay, so we have a council consisting of 22 members, including the ERC president. They are all researchers active that are active, and they have a dedicated implementation structure and agency to implement their ideas on how these calls have to be run. So I am working in that agency. Basically, the particularity is that here the most important value is to have to promote scientific freedom, and where scientific excellence is the only criterion, the only evaluation criterion. The idea is to support individual scientists, so we don't necessarily ask for a consortium, although there are proposals even in individual calls that can have more than one host institution. We don't have any priorities or any predetermined subjects that we want to favor. It's open to all the areas of science, and the idea is that it's completely bottom-up. We like to say that it's completely bottom-up in the sense that we don't have any priority of what type of subjects we want to fund. And the idea is that we follow international peer review to evaluate our proposals. So this is just to show you who are the members of the Scientific Council. We are divided in three main groups: life sciences, social sciences and humanities, and physical sciences and engineering. And possibly if you are from their domains, you will recognize their name as well. So we are also divided internally in panels, in the life sciences panels, physical sciences and engineering panels, and social sciences and humanity panels. And I am, for example, my panel, it's the one in computer science, belongs to the physical sciences and engineering. The particularity of the ERC over other calls that we have, for instance, in the EU, is that individual researchers can apply. That is open to all over the world. It's not only for EU nationals or from the associated countries. The idea is that to have a long-term grants, offering long-term grants to pioneering projects and in any field of frontier research. And when we say frontier research, it's not only fundamental research, it could be also applied, but we have, of course, a lot of proposals that a lot of projects that are on fundamental research. And not only in academia, we have also projects that can be done by by researchers that are based on industry, on research departments of industry. So about the budget, you already saw the poll. We have been normally having a steady increase, although you see that there was a decrease in 2021. That was because of the Brexit. I'm not going to talk more about the Brexit during the presentation, but it's when the UK left, then the budget decreased. But now that we is back in the program again, you see an increase as well in 2027 and in the other years. And the good news is that it seems that we will continue having an increase of the budget after 2027, although this is not still formally approved. So I want to make a point about the fact that it's open to anyone in the world, to any nationals from any country in the world. And the particularity of the ERC is also that the grantees can keep your affiliation in the home institution outside Europe. The requirement is that you need to spend a significant part of the work time in Europe, at least 50%, but we don't require to lose your affiliation in the home institute outside Europe. Team members can also be based outside Europe, but there are certain conditions for this. And grantees can move within Europe with a grant. And for this, we have also some support, some financial support to help them installing themselves in Europe. Asking to the researchers that had the grant, well, just why they applied to the ERC. Many underline that it is giving them the independence to work on the topic of their choice, because as I said, it's bottom up. So if you have a good idea on any domain and you convince the panel that it's worth doing it, you can in principle work on that. The financial autonomy, of course, for minimum the 5 years that offer the three main grants that we have. Synergy has even for 6. But there are many people that not have the financial autonomy, but still ask for the prestige that it gives them and also the projection that it gives to their career. Many of them mentioned that allow them to negotiate better conditions at work with their own home institutions. They attract easily collaborators to the teams. In certain disciplines, it's getting quite complicated to attract postdocs and researchers to work with them, and this is a good way of attracting them, having an ERC grant. Very important, the particularity that if you move to another institution, the grant moves with you. We have this portability. And also they tell us that the fact of having an ERC grant helped them a lot to attract additional funding to continue with other projects and to continue consolidating their own research team. So these are the calls that we have. We have 5 calls per year. Well, we have 5 schemes because in the POC case, we have 2 calls. So the starting, consolidator, and advanced grants are for researchers that might be in the different moment of their career. With the names you see that starting is for the starters, for early stage researchers. We ask at the moment persons that have 2 to 7 years after their PhD. After their PhD means after doing the viva of the PhD. These grants are for maximum 5 years, and you can ask for up to 1.5 million per grant. Consolidator is from 7 to 12 years after having the PhD. Here increases to 1 more million, to 2 million for the 5 years. And in advanced grants, here we don't have any limit on academic age, on how many years after the PhD. By the way, in advanced grants, also anyone can apply, even persons that are in the early stage researchers, it could be. And here you can ask for up to 2.5 million for 5 years. Then we have the synergy grants, where we are looking for synergy between different researchers. It's like it's not exactly like a classical consortium idea. Here we want really principal investigators that are very good in their domains, that collaborate very closely to solve a problem that otherwise it could not be tackled individually. Okay, so we are talking about grants where it could be between 2 to 4, either 2, 3, or 4 principal investigators. Here, because they are a bigger group, is up to 10 million for up to 6 years of duration. And the particularity is that one of the principal investigators can be based outside the EU or associated countries. I come into that afterwards. The last one, the proof of concept, is just the only ones that are eligible are people that have already an ERC grant. So I'm not going to enter too much into this. It's just for testing the idea of some research results to go into the market or into industry. So I'm not going to focus on that because I understand that the other 4 are the main interest in the audience. Apart from the budgets that the budget limitations that I told you, we have a way of topping up your budgets. And this is applicable for all the grants that I said. For instance, you can ask for 1 additional million for starting consolidation in advance, and up to 4 more million for synergy grants for the following cases. For startup costs of scientists moving to the EU or associated countries, meaning that if you are going to establish from your country to Europe, you will have the possibility to ask for more budget only for this, and is apart from the 1.5, 2, or 2.5 of the individual grants that I explained. Another reason can be purchase of major equipment, or for access to major equipment, or also for major experimental and fieldwork costs. Basically, if you have to set up some equipment in your lab that is very expensive, this could be as an extra part of this top up. And also to access to large facilities. This is in cases where you need to do a kind of work. For instance, people in physics use this to access the CERN, the facilities to do their experiments there, because they cannot do it if it's not in the very concrete places. Okay, so these are top-ups to the amounts that I gave you before. I'm going to the next. And as I said, the eligibility for the starting grants and the consolidator grants depends on your academic age, meaning in starting was from 2 to 7 years after doing the PhD, and for consolidation was from 7 to 12. But there are exceptions where we can extend this, and it's when you have certain career breaks. Career breaks for the reasons that you have in the slide. For instance, we have per reason of maternity. If there is a maternity leave, then you can extend this eligibility window by 18 months per child. It doesn't matter if the child was before or after the PhD. For paternity leaves is the actual time that was taken off at work. For military service, medical specialty training, well, you see all the cases there. And the idea is that if you are eligible for more than one of these aspects, you can add the limit, the time from the 2 to the eligibility windows. Okay, so there's no limit on how much you can extend the eligibility window, and we have people applying in advance, even if in starting, even if they had it more than 7 years from the PhD. Okay. Again, about the opening to the world, I'm talking about the EU member states, but also we have associated countries to the program, where you can really apply to a host institution there. So which are the eligible host institutions is all the EU member states, but also some countries that have associated with our program. And I listed there the countries. There are a couple of them, Switzerland and Morocco, that have some transitional agreements, but so far they are eligible. Okay, so far they are eligible, and the reason that this transition is because they are in the way of formalizing the agreement. And I insist, PIs can be of any nationality and from any current working place. And you have facilities, as I said, in the sense that you have the facility to have startup costs in moving into Europe. This could be part of the top up. You can have dual affiliation. If you are in Synergy, one of the PAs can be based outside the EU. And basically, this is trying to also encourage people from all over the world to come to Europe as well to work with us. I wanted to add you some statistics about how many people. Well, we saw now in the poll that is 80% of the grantees that have been from non-EU or associated countries. And these are the main statistics. You see that Australia and New Zealand are very high on the list there. Obviously, there is a lot of variability from which panels, from which domains, but these are the big figures, and it gives a good overview of what we have. The minimum time commitment. Well, we ask for the different grants a different time commitment. For the time spent in the project, for starting, we ask 50% of the researchers' time for the PI's time to be devoted for the project. In Consolidator, we ask minimum 40% and in advance 30%. For Synergy, we ask for each PI has to be minimum 30%. About the time to be spent during the whole duration of the project in the EU or the associated country, for starting Consolidator in advance, we ask 50%. For Synergy as well, this is the meaning of the spending a significant time of the project. But it is you see that one is in black for the case of Synergy is because that PI that is not one of the PIs within Synergy can be outside, and we don't ask this requirement of the 50% of the time during the whole project lifetime to have been spent working in the EU or associated country. Well, the particularity, as I said, about the evaluation. Now I'm going to talk about the evaluation process and the criteria. Our only criterion is excellence. Excellence in science and the impact in science. Why I underline this is because many other EU calls and many other funding agencies, they also ask for the impact, the societal benefit. So in our case, we only focus on the impact in science and the excellence in science, okay? So obviously, many of our projects have an impact, a positive impact in science, in the society, but it's not part of the evaluation criteria. So excellence in what? In two main aspects. It's two sub-criteria, in the research project and of the PI, of the personal investigator. So we are going to analyze the groundbreaking nature, ambition, and the scientific approach. And for the PI, the intellectual capacity, creativity, and commitment. There is one more important thing about the intellectual capacity, especially for starting. We need the PIs to demonstrate that they are capable of working independently. Okay, so it's part of this intellectual capacity as well. And I would like to underline this because they have to prove that they are able to individually, by themselves, be leading a research work. This is just a slide. I'm going to pass it very quick, just to show you what does it look like a proposal. Basically, we have different parts, three main parts. The administrative forms, which are the usual administrative forms, and there are some general questions. And I would like to underline that there are two parts in the more scientific content, which is what we call the part B1, which is the synopsis and the explanation, the information about the PI. So basically, this part B1 is a document that you describe what is your idea, the what, and the who. Okay? And part B2 would be more the how. Why we do it in two parts? It's because even if you have to submit all the information in a single moment, in a single point, we are going to evaluate in different steps. And in the first step, the experts will only analyze part B1. So you need to convince about, the panel about the what and the who, that the what and that you are capable of doing it before your part B2 will even be considered for the evaluation. So how do we do the evaluation process? There is an evaluation process for starting consolidator and advanced, which is practically the same. It's very similar. And there is another word for synergy. I start first with those individual calls for starting, calc, and advanced. We have two steps. For you, it's a single submission. You submit all the application, and then we evaluate it in two steps. In the first step, we only assess the part B1, that is the synopsis, the what, and the CV of the PI. We have a remote evaluation by the panel members, and then they meet in Brussels physically. And the outcome can be either that is rejected, the proposal is rejected, and then the feedback is sent to the applicants. And if it's not rejected, if it's retained, it goes to step 2. Then in step 2, this proposal, the full proposal, that is the part B1 and B2, and I insist on this because you don't have to repeat in the part B2 what is already in part B1, okay? So they take the synopsis, the detailed description, and the budget information, and this is going to be evaluated by the panel members and by remote reviewers that are chosen by the panel. The panel decides which are the best placed researchers over the world to act as remote reviewers, and our job is to basically look for them and to invite them for this. So they do an evaluation, and then in a step 2 panel meeting, they meet physically again in Brussels, and then we have interviews with the applicants that passed to step 2, with all of them. So these interviews, is important, are all online for the applicant, but the panel is physically in Brussels, okay? And well, basically the interview is just a presentation, a short presentation of the project, and then there are questions and answers, obviously. In total, it lasts 35 minutes with all the times that we use for the deliberations and so on. And at the end, is sent the feedback to applicants. So when you are applying to starting consolidator or advanced, you have to choose which is the better placed panel, meaning the topic of which is the closest panel to the topic of your proposal. And these are the panels that we have at the moment. For instance, mine is the one that is called there as PE6, Computer Science and Informatics. We have also multidisciplinary proposals. If you have a topic that falls not in one, but maybe in 2 or 3, you should choose the panel that has most likely the experts, where you are going to do the biggest scientific contribution, I would say. So this is basically the advice that we give, okay? And another thing that you have to do, if each panel has its own, what we call descriptors, where we divide that topic of the panel into subtopics. These are, for instance, the panel descriptors for my panel, which is computer science, and you see all the areas of computer science. Even for artificial intelligence, we have 3 descriptors. The machine learning, natural language processing, LLMs, and the general artificial intelligence. Why I show you this? Because you need to choose descriptors. You as applicants have to choose the descriptors that are more close to the topic of your proposal. Why is this important? Because this will facilitate us to allocate your proposal to the best reviewers we have, because the reviewers also have to declare their expertise against these descriptors. This is for all the calls. Also, Synergy has the same descriptors, okay? And of course, even if you go to a panel, if it's multidisciplinary, you have to use descriptors from different, you can use descriptors for from all the panels. Basically, the important is that you give us a guide of which are the best experts that we can choose for evaluating your proposal. Synergy is a different process because it has more than API, okay? So I would like to underline what is synergy, what is a synergy proposal and what is not a synergy proposal that has chances to have success. So here the idea is you have to prove that you want to tackle a scientific question, a scientific problem that can only be tackled with a collaboration of different PIs that are experts, each of them in their own domain. We are not looking for topics that can be done by a person, but a PI, and then has some people helping, but not really contributing fully to the solution. Okay? So if you have basically many synergy proposals don't make it because there is not a real cooperation between the different PI, there is not a real networking, or because they do things like simply passing data or information from one another. So unless this cooperation is needed and it's clear, it's not going to make it, okay? And one important thing, it doesn't have to be necessarily multidisciplinary. It can be within a same discipline. For instance, we had some synergy grants in my area in computer science, but there are people from different areas of computer science. One is more from interfaces, the other one is from AI, the other one is more from the hardware aspect, and they are all together building something, okay? So it doesn't have to be multidisciplinary necessarily to be eligible. The evaluation process, it's in 3 steps. For you, again, it's transparent because for you it's a single submission. And you saw the application format, you have it there. So basically, in step 1, there are, well, we have here for 2025, I put these figures. We sometimes change the number of experts evaluating synergy. This is the case for 2025. Now we have 90 panel members. For part B1, only 14 of them will meet. I mean, the 5 chairs and the 9 vice chairs. Why we need, it's more complicated because normally synergy proposals tend to be very multidisciplinary. So we have to make sure that we evaluate all single aspects of all single disciplinary aspects that each has, okay? So we have step 1, only with 14 of them evaluating. That meeting physically in Brussels. We have another 150 what we call PEVs that are other reviewers that are not formally part of the panel meeting, but have been other panel members, but have been panel members in previous calls. And in step 1, they only will analyze part B1. Again, the synopsis only, the what and the who. And the who, obviously, there are more than API. Step 2, they analyze the whole proposal, parts B1, B2, and the budget, done by the 90 panel members plus the remote reviewers per proposal. And here, there are no fixed panels like we have in the other grants. Here, you simply apply to synergy, and we made up the panels based on the affinity on the different topics. So here we have panels with very disciplinary expertises that are adapted to the different proposals. It's completely transparent to the applicants, but we have to do it like this because of this high diversity that we have. And in step 2 is mainly the text, I mean, revising the documents. And then in step 2 is the preparation for the interviews, and they have the interview where all the PIs have to go for the presentation in Brussels, and they go normally physically to Brussels. And up to now, it's like this. So I cannot tell you how many panels are in Synergy. It might be, this year will be between 5 and 7, depending on the topics that pass to step 2. This is decided after step 1 is finished. So I would like to simply rebate a few rumors that we hear about how to deal strategically with submitting a proposal in the ERC. One of the important things is that the budget is distributed among the scientific panels as a function of demand. What does it mean? It means that the success rate for all the panels is the same. We have basically a budget for the call, but we don't know how much budget we have per panel. Why do I say this? Because I will know my budget once I see which is the proportion of proposals in my panel over the whole call. So it's a pro rata by the number of proposals. So the success rate is the same in all the panels. The panel descriptors do not represent ERC scientific priorities. I explained you before these descriptors is for us to, for you to help us on identifying the right experts for your proposal. If many people think that they have to tick on many descriptors, even those that are not relevant, to show that like they are having more impact. This only confuses us and also confuse the panel. And you might have, it's much more important to be clear. If you only have one panel descriptor of two to mention, you don't have to fill them all because you might confuse the whole panel about it. The publication record is not decisive in selection decisions. Why do I say this? We have cases of people very senior, very well established that they expected. I mean, people even with Nobel Prize winners that we reject their proposals because they are doing something incremental. Here we are looking for new ideas, not to fund people doing exactly the same that they've been doing in the same trajectory until very recently. It has to be a new idea, and you don't have to have a publication in Nature or in Science to be eligible or to have a grant. You need to have a good idea and to show that you are the one capable of doing that idea. Another important thing, the host institution is not an evaluation criterion. This might be surprising for many people. I mean, the prestige of the institution is not evaluated. And the reason is that, as I said, our grants are portable. So you can now declare that your host institution will be a concrete one, and then in the second month on the grant, move to another one. So that's why it's not an evaluation criterion. And the success rate is not linked to academic age. And for this, I'm going to show you the next slide. Why do I underline this? Is that many people tell us that, okay, imagine that I'm going to apply to starting. I can apply between 2 to 7 years after doing my PhD. Then some people think, okay, I will wait not to do it at the beginning when I have only 2 or 3 years after my PhD. I will wait to have 6 or 7 so that I have more scientific production, and then I can have more chances. Well, the panel, when the panel members are evaluating the proposals, they take these things into account. And we did a study to see if the success rate by age it's consistent over the years. And as you see, oh, sorry, it went to the next slide. As you see, it's quite flat, except in the corners. There you see that we have also people applying to starting even with 44 years old, 45-year-old. And this might seem surprising for you, but this is because of this eligibility window extension. Maybe they had career breaks for any reason and they were applying later. But you see as well, anyway, the important thing here is that it's quite flat. So if you have a good idea, even if you are at the beginning of the eligibility window, please, I encourage you to do it, because it's not a good strategy just to wait for the very end and then only do one try when you can try many other times, okay? So for the calendar of the calls, this is the latest we have at the moment. The last one on the proof of concept, I said, is a call is very particular only for the ERC grantees that already have a grant, but for the others, you have it there, okay? As you know, the slides will be shared, so I don't have to read something that you can read by yourselves. This is mainly for the persons that were following the ERC in previous years. There is a change in 2026 over the previous years. And is that I said that we have a top-up budget of up to 1 more million for starting COG and advance for the moving of the researchers to establishing in Europe. If the person is establishing from outside the EU, and the associated countries, because this is also eligible for people within a country in Europe moving to another. But if you are coming from outside Europe and associated countries, like many of you might be, in the case of, it might be the case for many of you, you can also ask for more than 1 million, even up to 2 million, if this is well justified. Okay, you have to justify why this cost. Okay, so. And there is one more announcement that I need to do. We are currently working on a new funding instrument, on a new type of call to offer more ambitious researchers, even substantial funding to up to 7 years. And even it will be more budget than the 2.5 millions of the advance calls. So it's part of a political initiative called Choose Europe for Science. I cannot give you more details at the moment, but the idea is that this will be announced hopefully in October. These are the expectations. Again, nothing is decided. I cannot give you details because it's in the making at the moment, but it might be interesting also for many of you. For 2027, for the calls in 2027 that I didn't really describe in the table, there are already some changes expected, and the council announced that they think that it's not a good idea on starting and COG to have this eligibility windows so strict like this. They want to extend them more. So the idea will be that starting will be extended from immediately after doing the PhD until 10 years. And for COG, it will be from 5 years after the PhD to 15 years. So they want to extend and to have an overlap so that the PIs can choose to which call apply. The consolidator grant, of course, has more budget, but also normally is more competitive for more junior researchers, let's say. So, but the idea is to leave it open for the applicants. This is the idea. This is what we are working for, but this will be formalized when we have the 2027 calls published in the work program, when the details are defined. So this is just a few figures of the ERC. I leave it for you. I'm not going to just read something that you can read by yourselves. And where can you find more information? Well, you have, apart from the usual sources of information, there are a few colleagues of mine that were very brave to do some videos explaining different parts of how to do the preparation for the interview, how to prepare the synopsis, how to prepare, I mean, based on our own experience as officers doing many, many evaluations, just to explain to the community how to do all this. You have this openly available on the internet. You have a link there. Since you will have the slides, you will click on the slide and on the link, and you will have access to this. So this is it. Thank you very much, and I am open for questions afterwards when the time is. Now I go back to Nisha. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Endika. I think it was extraordinary the way you presented everything, very clear. I can see that there is a lot of interest, which means that there are a lot of questions that are on the Q&A interface. Of course, if you see there are straightforward ones, please feel free to type, or else we will take the questions after Damien has presented his experience with ERC. Now, let's swiftly move on to Damien. Damien is an associate professor at Australian National University, and more interestingly, he has just finished his ERC starting grant this year. So let's hear from Damien what his experience with ERC grants was. Over to you, Damien.
Thanks. Let me just share my screen. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes, all good.
Great. So thank you. And this is not a very showy presentation because I focused to mainly try and share sort of my experience in going into applying for an ERC grant, and also some reflections that I've made both from my own experience, but also through interacting with lots of other people who have themselves applied, and some of them have been successful also in applying for ERC grants as well. I've noted that this is mostly within my field, but I've tried to sort of make the advice a little bit general. So I was being asked to really talk about why I applied for the ERC starting grant and how I did it. So my pathway is a bit convoluted. So I started my career in a different discipline. I started as an engineer, and now I am a wildlife biologist, so very different fields. And this was interfaced by an industry job that took me a while to sort of transition into research and the field of ecology. But my lucky break came in 2010 when I was awarded a PhD, and this PhD was actually funded by an ERC advanced grant to my PhD supervisor at the University of Oxford. And the experience I had during this time was that I benefited hugely as a PhD student because this grant was really doing field-defining research. So a lot of the methods that we established and the studies that we conducted have been very well cited and have really been foundational to the field of work, which in my field is really the study of animal social behavior and animal collective behavior. From that and the successes that we got opened the door for me to go to do some exciting postdocs. So I got a postdoc fellowship at UC Davis, and we also got a grant sort of as a spin-off from the ERC grant in Oxford. So I sort of did fellowships in these two places. And from that, and sort of also building on the results of the ERC grant, we had some really major outputs, including so-called high-impact papers, and have a review that also now finished then, but now has over 1,000 citations. And so what these things really set me up for is I think that my experience on the ERC grant as a PhD student gave me the sort of vision of what an ERC grant might look like, which I think was a really beneficial thing for me. And the results I produced from that and my postdocs, as well as the movements that I've done moving from Australia to the UK and UK to the US, gave me that sort of track record and the mobility. And I'll come back to my reflections on the importance of these things a little bit later. Then in 2015, I was lucky to get a group leader position at a fairly newly established Max Planck department in Max Planck Institute that was then ornithology and is now the Max Planck Institute of Animal Behavior. And as this, as part of my proposal here, and what I did was I aimed to establish my own research system, which I did with a bunch of small grants. This is me catching the very first bird that I studied. These are vulturine guinea fowl that live in central Kenya. And with this, I sort of started based on my experiences that I had as a PhD student and as a postdoc. And I tried to sort of develop a system that would sort of take the best of those two things that I worked on. I'll come back to that a little bit later. But what I was able to achieve at the start of this was to replicate a science paper that we had produced at a very small scale. But I realized that if I wanted to really scale up beyond that, I would need to apply for a big grant that had a lot of funding to do this because it's costly research. And so how do I expand the scale of this project? Well, the most obvious thing for me was an ERC grant, or specifically an ERC starting grant. And so I submitted my grant on the 15th of October in 2018 for the 2019 call. This was 4 years after I had finished and defended, 4.5 years after I defended my PhD, which was still early or maybe in the middle of the window for eligibility for an ERC starting grant. And was 2 years after I established this project. And this is important because at the point where I applied for this ERC grant, I hadn't actually published any papers on my new project. But again, I'll come back to that in my reflections. So why did I apply for this? Partly because I had a very positive experience doing my PhD on the grant. I could see that the ERC grant allowed for a large scope of work, sufficient funding that one can explore new questions that emerge over the course of the project. But also the grant managed to have a lot of impact in the field. And I could see how the ERC grant and the sort of body of funding that it produced and the flexibility in the sense of that funding and allowed that to happen. Also, the potential of the project and the system that I'd set up. So in my PhD, I did a PhD studying large populations, but very loose social structure. So this is on these great tits, which are common to anyone who's been to Europe, common garden bird in Europe. But then my postdoc was on primates, which form small but cohesive groups. And what I identified was a major gap in study systems of social behavior, which is systems or species where we could study large populations, but also that form these cohesive groups. So I was looking for a system that could bridge these two sorts of scales of social organization. And that's where that system that I just introduced before really came in. And the third and obvious reason for applying for an ERC grant is that they are quite prestigious, right? So gaining an ERC grant in Europe is kind of like gaining a very prestigious fellowship, especially for a starting grant. So this gave me not only 5 years of really continuous funding to have that deep focus on my research, but also it was a very positive thing for my CV. Why did I think I could apply for an ERC grant? So there's the sort of the logical or the sort of practical side of it, but also, why did I think I might be competitive for it? So coming back, I had a strong track record, which I thought, especially with these high profile papers, would allow me to do, would show my ability to do what is called high risk, high reward research. I think the ERC has changed that wording, but that's the wording that was used in my call. And I'd shown mobility, and I've just added this now to reflect some of the discussion in the previous talk. I think my track record also showed research independence. I had my own system, I published single author papers, and I had a group leader position. I also had experience working on the ERC grant, which gave me, I think, the vision of what a grant might look like, which is a really beneficial thing. I had an excellent host institute, which I know that I wasn't evaluated on that per se, but within my application, I could refer to the collaborations and the the mentorship and the support that I could receive from some of the key people within my host institute. So it wasn't the host institute per se, but the sort of environment that it provided that could give me, help me with support, help me succeed in this project. And, maybe I think most importantly, that I had this new system that could clearly go beyond existing work. And I had outstanding pilot data, which I'll show in a moment, some examples of, that could fill this gap between these cohesive groups and these population level studies. And because I'd established a system myself, I had ownership over the research. So this is an example. This is pulled straight out of my ERC grant. I put in a lot of my data into that grant to demonstrate both the potential of the system, but also my ability to collect the data. So I could show that I was able to do fine scale movement tracking, which is something that is now more common in the field, but was pretty rare back then, at the individual level, and scale that out to population level. And I could replicate some of the things that people had done in much longer term studies, and I was able to achieve just in the 2 years of the study that I had been conducting so far. The application process itself was long. It takes a lot of work. And back then, it was a bit longer than it is now even. It's been just shortened recently, but it was quite exciting. This is because I was, and I still am, passionate about the project. So I found that writing it was quite easy. I had ownership over the work, so I could really, I could propose the ideas that I thought were the best. But I could also see the long-term benefits to being successful in this grant. And I had sort of clear opportunities or ideas to expand beyond existing work in my field and in the literature. I think I also benefited for some advantages of timing. So I was really working on what has become a rapidly growing field of research, the field of collective animal behavior. There's been a massive boom in this field since the sort of mid-2010s. And one thing that really reminded me about the application process was that the interview I found very, very stressful. I was really struggling. And one thing I did to prepare for that is I memorized every single word within that talk. I could lay down and close my eyes and give the entire talk without looking at my slides. And I think this helped me get through the interview process. How did I put my proposal together? Well, what I really focused on in my proposal is that I focused on what I thought I was best known for among my peers, among the people who might get my proposal to review. So I looked at my track record, I looked at my methodological developments that I had advanced, and I really focused on where I thought I'd had the most impact and how I could use this to my advantage. I also, within the proposal, added areas that were new for me and for the project. So I suggested that I would go down more into the genomics. In the end, that did not succeed. I did not manage that, but I think that is part of the ERC grant, is that you can propose things that might not be successful without any penalties. And I added some high risk or new frontier aims. In my case, this was combining physiological measurements of individuals, birds, together with collective behavior in the wild. And I was very successful at this. This was just published in Current Biology, this nice piece on looking at the physiological cost of leadership, or the cost that leaders pay when being in collective movements. So the result of my application in 2019 was I got this email. This was the subject of the email. ERC SCG call gave no hints as to what the result was going to be. And luckily I had gone to a workshop that was run by the German, I can't remember what they're called, but the point of contact for the ERC. And they had warned us that you get this very cryptic email that tells you if you're successful that your proposal has been retained for funding. So because I was pre-warned of this, I knew to take this as a success, but it's a bit ambiguous if you're not aware of that. Now, reflecting on why did I think that my application was successful and what might be some of the determining factors. So I talked a little bit about these things. I talked about vision. I talked about my mobility and my passion, my track record, my experience working on similar projects, my host institute, and this exciting system that had clear potential. And in discussing with other people who have applied and tracking their sort of applications and looking at what I think, at least in my area, determines success, I would say that this last point was singularly the most important. And if I had to say what's the best predictor of an ERC starting grant for someone in my field, I would say it's a classical high-impact paper that coincides with the grant. So I talked about how I had put a lot of data. I demonstrated my application, how I was able to achieve my aims. And this was translated within the next year, actually before or just around the same time as the grant started. I'd gone from having published no papers on the grant, and we got current biology, science advances, and eLife papers that were published around the time of the start of the grant. And so I was able to demonstrate the potential because the pieces that formed these papers were part of my application, in part of the background and the pilot data that I could show and use as evidence for the potential for my work. So if I had to, people ask me about applying for a starting grant, I think maybe a bit of a checklist that I use looks a bit something like this. So first, I asked them, is this an obvious project to fund, right? The competition is really stiff. The quality of all the applications is extremely high. They come from everywhere in the world. People are putting their best ideas and projects. And so I think asking about the value of the system or the value of the project to the science or to the scientific field. If you can say, well, this seems like an obvious project that should be funded, then that's a pretty good chance. Now, part of this obvious is like whether the project has a potential to change or expand or define a field. Right? One thing that I benefited from is that I was riding this kind of wave of interest in animal social behavior. And so it was an exciting topic that people wanted to do. And I was able to ride the crest of this wave and create these fundamental advances and perspectives to the field. Now, are you the right person to lead such a project? And most importantly, can you demonstrate this, both yourself as the person to lead, whether you have ownership and a track record and the methods to solve the problem, but also can you demonstrate the potential of the problem? And here I think pilot data is really critically important. And the evidence for this is that some of my peers that have gotten them have published in Nature or Science or Current Biology, PNAS, and all these places around the same time as they have received the ERC. I think I'm almost finished. There are some challenges with applying for ERCs. I think the ERC is administratively onerous. It's a lot of work. And this means that some institutes are a little bit reluctant to sometimes host new applicants. This is in part because the fixed overhead rate might not cover their costs of hosting the institute. But also in Europe, what I'm finding is a lot of institutions have space limitations, and there's so much uncertainty of who will and who will not succeed. It's very difficult for them to plan things in advance. So, I think this is a sort of a slight changing landscape. So if you're looking to apply for an ERC and you're looking for a host, start early. And I just added this after reading some of the Q&A questions and some of what happened before. So I applied for my grant in Germany, but then in between, I got a fellowship to also move to Switzerland. And so I was able to move my ERC grant from Germany, from a German host at the Max Planck to the University of Zurich in Switzerland. And then a year into my position in Zurich, I actually got offered a position in Australia at the Australian National University, which is what I have now. And so I was able, through negotiations between Australia and also agreement of the ERC, to take up this 50% position in Australia, which meant a few things. One is that I was only 50% working on the project in Europe, but that still satisfied the minimum 50%. Actually, I was a little bit less in the later years because I think it's calculated over the whole term of the grant. And so because I was 100% for the first couple of years, I was able to be a little bit less in Switzerland towards the end. But, the flexibility of the ERC really allowed me to fit it around sort of my career needs and the sort of career opportunities as they came up. And would I do it again? Absolutely. But I would only do it with the right project at the right time. And I'm actually currently putting together a lead PI, an ERC synergy grant that's due in a month's time. And for that, I will again go only 50% in Australia, and with a host in the EU, get a 50% position there. And the nice thing about the ERC is I can pay for my own salary. So I can find a host a little bit more easily because they don't have to fund my salary. I can fund myself on the ERC grant. And with that, thank you very much for attending and sticking around for my talk. And I will stop.
Thank you very much,
Pass over to you,
Damien.
Shant.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Very interesting insights from you. And you can see in the Q&A very interesting questions coming your way as well. But yeah, we have a lot of questions to cover. And I see that already Endika has answered a number of them by writing. Thank you very much, Endika, for already doing that. With that, please join me in thanking our two amazing experts, Endika and Damien, for their time. I'm sure our audience got a lot of useful insights, and I can see that from a lot of chat and responses that we have been receiving, that the audience really appreciated your talk. Thank you very much, both of you, for taking out time. For those who are still there, when you exit the webinar, there are 2 survey questions that we request you to answer. It's very straightforward, it's anonymous, so please consider letting us know so that we can improve on whatever we are working on. And to wrap up, please allow me to reiterate to keep an eye on our social media platforms to get notified of news and events from the European research landscape. This brings us to the end of today's session and signing off from all of us. And thank you again, Endika and Damien, for your time. Wishing you a good week ahead. Thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Thank you.